Hello, and welcome along to the next video in this series. So in the previous one, we looked at setting up and configuring Chocolatey on a machine that is going to be our Nexus server when we don't have any access to the internet. So it was really walking through what was needed to get Chocolatey and all of its components installed on a machine that's in an air-gapped network. And the reason for this is that in an organizational context, you may not have all the machines having access to the internet. You want to have Chocolatey being able to be installed on machines that are offline, and then also then providing packages that can be installed in an offline scenario. And that's really what the focus of using a Nexus repository is all about. So out of the box, Chocolatey will work against the community repository. The community repository has something like over 7,000 different packages that you can install on your environment. The problem there is that when you reach out to the internet, there's potential for internet sites being down, chocolatey.org as well. There are then third-party dependencies in terms of downloading from, say, a Microsoft server or from another server where the actual installer is. By downloading and internalizing all of those packages and the contents of those installers, you isolate yourself from any network problems. And by using an internal Nexus repository, it means you can host all of those internally, and then again you're saving bandwidth across your environment because all those installations will happen without reaching out to the internet. So where we got to in the previous video is we got Chocolatey fully set up and installed in this air-gapped network. So there's a couple of things that I want to do here just to kind of finish off that process. So the first one, if I go up to here and I say Chocolist local only, then we don't have any packages installed really. So I'm going to do choco install bginfo. So that's the package that we downloaded and internalized in another video. And it's really the tool that we're going to use to provide information on the desktop about which machine that we're currently on. So what we've got, I mean, I really need a package for this next part, and I might do that as part of another video. But what I want to do here is I want to go into the C program files folder. Where does it want to be? It wants to be, just check my notes here, program files. So in here, there should now be a sysinternals folder. No, it didn't have that. So if I do, where do I want to place this? If I run this, that won't work. bginfo. What I want to do is I want to place a file that I have into the right location. So where do I want to put it? I know what I want to do. I want to replace the text that's here. I don't want to spend too long on this, but if we run bginfo again, file, open, let's just navigate to it. So one of the files that I copied over into the Choco setup folder is this computer information BGI, and that's the one I want to apply to this machine. Okay, so that's the part I need to figure out how to do within a package. So ideally I'd be able to wrap that logic into a package and then install that on a machine so that every machine in my environment then has this host information that I can then clearly see. So to make things a little bit easier going forward, I also want to re-enable the network connection. So in the previous video, I specifically disabled the network connection to prove that we were installing in a fully air-gapped network. To make things easier going forward, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to have that enabled so I can continue to move files across between machines, etc. when I need to. But the previous video was really illustrating that the installation of Chocolatey can happen in that air-gapped network. So what I want to do is I'm going to go back over to my workstation, my machine. So my workstation machine is the one that I'm going to do all the prep work on for what needs to be done. So what I need to do here is I need to look at the initial script that we used before. So let's open this up again in Notepad. So one of the things that we did here, I won't zoom in on this one because I'm just going to grab a command here. So I'm going to grab this one and I'll put it into my PowerShell window. So in a previous video, we showed how we can use the Chocolatey download, the Choco download command, which is the package internalizer, which can reach out to a repository, in this case chocolatey.org. It then can download and internalize those packages. So the one that I'm going to download and internalize now is one called the Nexus Repository. So it's the package that we're going to use to install Nexus on our other machine. So I'm doing this on my workstation machine because, again, the workstation machine is the machine that does all the work for us. So the Chocolatey had an error formatting string. I'm not entirely clear on what that error is. So we may have to dig into what's going on there, but let's wait and see what happens. So as that's downloading, what it will be doing is in our packages folder, it will be looking at creating another package for us, which is the Nexus Repository package. So that's almost downloaded that file, and it's downloading. So there must be multiple URLs contained within that installer. So it's downloading and internalizing all of them, so it can do what it needs to do in a fully offline mode. So we'll let it download this one as well. Now, once this is done, I'll be able to pull that new package from this machine onto our Nexus machine, and we will go ahead with the installation over there, and we'll see if we can get that to work. And then once that's done, we're going to set up a couple of sources in our Nexus repository. Now, I have another video where I walk through the process of setting up Nexus in a what's referred to as a cached setup. So it creates a virtual repository for chocolatey.org. Now, the reason you want to do that is to essentially protect yourself from the potential for rate limiting. So if you're pulling lots of packages from chocolatey.org, chocolatey.org has the concept of rate limiting. So it will stop you by giving you a 429 response to your requests when you make too many requests. By setting up a virtual repository against chocolatey.org, what it will do is that it will download and sorry, I'm going to use that terminology correctly. It's going to download and it's going to cache the nutkeg into Nexus. Now, that's not a fully internalized package. That's what the Choco download command is doing. All that's doing is it's downloading the nutkeg and putting it into the Nexus repository. It will still reach out to the internet when installation time for any URLs that are contained within that package. So by setting up a caching repository with Nexus, you can protect yourself from rate limiting against chocolatey.org, but it won't have all of the installers contained within the nutkegs. And I'll put a link in the description to where I have that information about setting that up. We're not going to do this in this context because the process that we're going to follow is we're going to have Choco download working because we're on a Chocolatey for Business. We can download and internalize those packages, and we can put them into our internal feeds without the need to have a virtual repository set up. So that has created a new package for the OpenJDK, so the adopt OpenJDK, and the other one that it created was the Nexus repository. So I'm going to take my workstation out of the equation. Oh, I might leave it up there so it's in the right place. I will bring back up my Nexus repository. Let me just get it in the right place. So if we go back over to our workstation machine, so I'll go back to the C drive of there, and I will pull up the other one into our Choco setup. So into here, I am going to copy this one because it's just been internalized. And then the other one was my Nexus repository. So at the minute, I'm manually maintaining that packages folder. And this is what's going to be replaced by setting up and configuring Nexus. So rather than having a file share that's got all the nutkegs in it, we're going to be pushing and maintaining all of those packages in our Nexus repository. So with that done, I'm here again on my Nexus machine. I should be able to do a Choco install of Nexus-repository. and let's see what that does. Now I think, or I know because of the dependencies that were in play, it will install the adopt OpenJDK, which is what it's attempting to do just now, and then it will install Nexus. So I don't actually know how long this takes. It's actually not been too long. So I was going to say that I might pause the video while that's happening, but it looks like it is not going to take too long. So I'll maybe just keep the video rolling just now. So just looking at the output here, so that it's checked that the hashes match, which is to be expected. It's copying files into C program data Nexus, which must be where it installs Nexus 2. And while that's happening, I will bring up one other piece of documentation. Didn't need that. That was something copying to my host machine, which I didn't really want. What I was going to look at here was there's another piece of information regarding a how-to that I will reference here, which is to how to automate package internalizer. So this is something we're going to come on to, because this is where we start using Jenkins as a CI/CD platform for automating the maintenance of those packages. But what I do want to reference here is the feeds that it has available. So I thought there was a diagram that showed them, but no, there's not. That's unfortunate. So we'll talk through what it's going to do. What I'm going to have instead is I'm going to have 2 feeds set up within Nexus. Now you can have as many as you want, depending on your setup. But I'm going to have one that is essentially a test repository. That's where I'm going to push and consume packages to initially as I'm testing things out. And then once I'm happy that the things that are in my test repository do what I want them to do and they're not known to cause any issues, I'm going to have another feed that is my production repository. So on all of my end points, all of my client machines, they're only ever going to have access to the production repository. But on something like my workstation machine will have access to both the test repository and the production repository. So I'll use my workstation machine that's in the DMZ. It's isolated from anyone else that's on my network. I'll use the workstation machine to test packages that have been pushed to that test repository. And then once I'm happy, I will then push them into the production repository so that my client machines can have access to them. So that's the intention. Now, what's happening here is it's just kind of waiting for the Nexus service to come to life. So what we should hopefully see, if we were to go over to our services snap-in, we should see, oh, it's there. It was there, didn't have to do it. So there's some output there saying what I need to do now. So this is really useful information that we're going to need to take a look at once it's finished. So we're getting very close to being ready, I think. So what I was going to show here is that there should now be a new Windows service that is Nexus. So this is what it has installed for us, and it's now up and running. So what it's saying, let's read through some of this information. It's always useful to look at the output of a Chocolatey install because there is useful information in there. So it's saying there that you may receive an error, localhost connection refused to connect until Nexus is fully started. So what we should have in here, let's go up and have a look. Let's paste this into here. Now that that service is up and running, it should hopefully be available. Okay, so that's maybe the error that it was talking about until it's fully set up. So we'll keep that open and keep that looking. You can manage the repository by saying that, which is what we did. The default user is admin and the admin password. New installs, the password generated for your instance is recorded in C program data. So if we go over to, that's our workstation one. So let's go over to C, program data, Sonatype Nexus work. So I don't see that. I do. Sonatype work, and then Nexus 3, and then in here there is indeed a file called admin password. So we're going to need to look at that file to find out the admin password in order to log in. And what I suspect is going to happen is that we're then going to be prompted to change that password to be something else. So let's see if it's up and running yet. There we go. So now that the service is fully up and running and configured and it's done its initial setup, I can now get into my Nexus repository. So if I go to this file and I open this in here, this is my admin password. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. So let's go ahead and get signed in. So I'm going to type in admin and I'm going to put in that password. Admin is signed in. So then we get stepped through a wizard. So this is the initial setup wizard. You'll only see this once. So we'll go ahead and click next. And I'm going to put a password in here that I will remember. And I'm going to click next. Now I'm going to be prompted here for, do you want to configure anonymous access? Now this is something that you can configure after the fact. So your decision here is not a final decision. But what this is really talking about is, what do we want to have users who are consuming packages need a username and password to get packages from the repositories, or do we want to allow them to just be able to consume them? So the analogy there is that on chocolatey.org, anyone can consume a package from chocolatey.org. They don't need to provide a username and password. Now, in terms of how I'm going to set things up, I'm going to set it up in such that folks can install packages without needing a username and password. So I'm going to say enable anonymous access. But obviously that's dependent on your environment, dependent on your rules and regulations. You may require that people use a username and password, and that's totally fine. But for this setup, I'm going to say I want to enable anonymous access, and then I'm complete. So this is me now in Nexus, right? So Nexus has got lots of support for different repository types, one of which is a NuGet feed, which is what we're going to use for Chocolatey, but it has multiple different types available. So if I were to go and click on repositories here, and I would say if I were to create a new repository, then there are lots of what it calls recipes that I can choose from. So I can have an apt repository, I can have a Bower one, Conda, Docker, Go, Helm, Maven, NuGet. There's lots of different ones. And even within the context of NuGet, there are 3 different types. There is a NuGet group, there's a NuGet hosted, and there's a NuGet proxy. So the NuGet proxy is the virtual repository that I spoke about before. So that's it. If you wanted to cache or mirror an upstream repository, you would use a proxy one. If you wanted to create a single feed that was actually a combination of multiple different ones, then that's where a group would come in. So a group is literally creating a single URL for one or more other repositories. And the other one, which is the one that I'm going to use, is a hosted repository. So the hosted repository is literally give me a feed that is going to be hosted within this Nexus instance here. So there's lots of documentation on the Nexus repository itself. So I'm not going to dig too deep into all of these things, but let's go ahead and set up a couple of NuGet feeds. So I'm going to select NuGet hosted here, and I'm going to give it a name. So the name I'm going to give it is, this is going to be my, I'm going to be try to think what I want to call it. You know what, let's just call it test repository. You can call it whatever you want. Blob stores, I'm going to use the default one. Nexus has a concept of having different stores for its information. You can set up like an AWS blob storage and have your instance backed by AWS. I'm going to use the default one here. There's an option here about redeploying of packages. I'm going to say in the same context of chocolatey.org, once a package is pushed, I'm going to say it's immutable and you can't deploy the same version of the package again. So I'm going to say disable redeploy. Cleanup policies, again, that's for a different discussion. But if you are pushing lots of packages and you want to restrict how many you've got, there are various different cleanup policies you can use within the repository, but that's for a different discussion. So I'm going to go ahead and click go there. So what's now been created for me is a NuGet hosted repository. So this is the one that I've created here, and it's no, that's not the one I just created. NuGet, this is my one. Oh, so it's actually already created some things for me. Interesting. So what is this one proxying to? This is proxying. Oh, so Nexus out of the box comes configured with so these three feeds that are here already. This is the setup that you would use if you did want to proxy something like chocolatey.org. So it's got a group which will group together. I'm suspecting it will group together. Let me just check. Yeah, so it's grouped together the NuGet hosted one and also the proxy. So in this setup, you would point your clients at the NuGet group, and then if a package doesn't exist already within the hosted NuGet package, it would then reach out to the NuGet.org and pull that package and put it into that hosted repository. So this is a setup that I talk about in my other video. So good to know that it's already there. But what we have now is this test repository that we will use for testing packages out to make sure that they work the way they want them to. And the second thing I want to do, I want to create another one, which is to have my production repository. So I'm going to create another repository here. So I'm going to create one, and I'm going to be very imaginative, and I'm going to call it the prod repository. So again, you can call it whatever you want. So let's do this, prod repository, and I'm going to say defaults for all of those again. Okay, now the last thing that I want to do here is I want to ensure that in order to push a package into one of these, I'm going to want to set up a NuGet, an API key within Chocolatey. And the way that that's done within Nexus, so you can just about see it here, is under this realm section. So at the minute, the ones that are active are a local authenticating realm and a local authorizing realm. What I also need to enable is the ability to use a NuGet API key. So I'm going to go ahead and move that over, and I'm going to hit save. So with that done, in order to push a package into one of those feeds, I will need to use my NuGet API key. So I can see this here. If I log in with my password that I didn't type properly. Okay, so this is my NuGet API key that I would need to use in my client's, most likely my workstation machine, when I start pushing packages into one of these feeds. Okay, so with those set up, if I go back to here, so that's pretty much the setup and configuration of the Nexus repository. That's literally it. There's not much to it. I mean, there's lots that you can dig into in terms of setting up high availability clusters, redundancies, backups, all that sort of stuff. But that's really Nexus documentation. In terms of what we need for the organizational setup that we're doing here, it's literally it. There's two feeds that I'm going to use, one test repository and one production repository. So the last thing that I need to do is if I go up to here and clear the screen, currently, if I do a Choco source list, we'll see that we have we've got our local packages repository, and we have the Choco license repository. So I'm going to want to set up additionally the two feeds that we've just created. So if we go back to here and we look at browse, actually I'm going to need to do it through here. So I'm in the settings, I'm in repositories, and I click on my test repository here. Then this is the URL that I'm interested in here. So if I say copy this, then on this machine, I can do Choco source add I can never remember the syntax. So let's do choco source -h. If we scroll back up, then there are some examples. Then I want to add a name and then the source. So I'm going to do choco source add name is going to be test. Test feels a little bit. Let's call it test nexus with source of there. So that's going to add in a new source to there. And let's change this slightly to make this prod. Can't type. And then let's call this prod nexus. And if we list out our sources again, so we've now got a test nexus and a prod nexus. And if I do choco source list from source test nexus, we'll see that there are no packages in there. Why did that not work the way I wanted to? Choco source. Oh, sorry, not choco source list, just choco list source test nexus. We'll see that there are no packages in there, which is to be expected because it's a brand new repository that doesn't have anything in it. And same with our prod nexus, there are no packages contained within it. So that's pretty much it. In these last two videos, we have worked on setting up and installing Chocolatey in offline machine, our Nexus repository, or our Nexus server rather. Then we've downloaded and internalized the Nexus repository package on our workstation machine. We've brought it over into our Nexus packages folder, and then we've installed Nexus locally on this machine, and we've now set up and we've configured two repositories within that Nexus server, which we can then use as part of our ongoing organizational setup. Now that ongoing organizational setup is now we're moving on to the next phase. So if we go back to our documentation here, so where we got to, we have set up a package repository. So we've done exercise 2, and this next exercise is about adding packages to that repository. So what we're doing here is, so we'll do that next then. We will literally, all of those packages that we have in our local package folder, which is in our C setup packages, we will look to bring all of these packages into our Nexus repository and making them available on that production feed. And then we'll look at where we need to go next. So hopefully you'll be able to join me in the next video. And again, if there are any questions or I haven't covered something in enough detail, definitely feel free to reach out. But for now, thank you very much. Thanks for listening.